Good morning and good evening for some of us who are elsewhere. My name is Saeed Khan, and I'd like to welcome you back to yet another episode of The Week That Was. You're probably noticing that on your screen we are but a troika today. Fear not, there is always a chance that there are going to be some others who are jumping on. It might be due to the fact that we are now no longer in daylight savings and people still haven't adjusted their clocks, but that hasn't affected one of our brethren, who, of course, is quite loyal to this, chiming in from a different part of the world. We have co-founder of Deadline Detroit, Allan Lengel, broadcasting from
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem.
I just got in about 2 hours ago, and it is now
boy, are your arms tight.
Yeah, right. It's 6:32 p.m. right now.
Wow.
And I was saying I got in, I got dropped off near the place I'm staying at Airbnb, and the streets were, because it's a Sabbath, the streets were fairly empty, and the stores were shut down, and kind of a little eerie. But
well, I'm glad that you're finally taking a vacation. You know, for those who watch the show but are not aware, we gave our parting gift, the staff parting gift for our boss when we folded Deadline, was a voucher for air travel on a real airline too, on Delta.
Yes, right. Yeah. Yes,
so I'm glad
Delta.
you're finally taking a trip and a vacation, and getting the hell out of this place for a while.
Yep.
So.
Well, you are just fortunate that Spirit doesn't fly to the Middle East. So
there we go. That's right.
We have going around the horn.
Next time you're found with your chin on the ground, there's a lot to be learned.
All right. Making a grand entrance.
Think you'll move that rubber tree plant.
Yeah. This is the Democrats.
He's got
how long
All right.
Sinatra sang that for the JFK election? I mean,
it
was that, wasn't it? Yes, we have Greg Bowens, public relations specialist extraordinaire, and of course, a different kind of veteran for Veterans Day, veteran journalist Nancy Derringer here. So there you go. Yes, we just passed the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month when armistice was signed, regarding the first of the two world wars, or as some scholars might say, it was just one long world war with a lot of stuff that happened in the middle. So there you go. All right, we have one topic and one topic alone on the agenda today, with several subcategories, and that, of course, is the midterm elections. There is something to be said about this, so I want to actually go around the horn.
There's a lot to be said about it. There's a lot to be said.
There is that. So I want to actually go around the horn first to get this going. And Nancy, I can see you are just chomping on the bit with this. What do you make of the 2022 midterms?
In a succinct phrase, polls are shit, because and I'm very sympathetic. I'm kind of sorry that Ed Sarpolis isn't here, because I'd really, our guy from Target Insight, pollster, I really would love to talk to him about, why polling was so terrible this time, and has been terrible. And it's been terrible. I'm very sympathetic to how difficult that job is, because, ever since the advent of cellular telephones, it's very hard to reach people. It's hard to, it's just, it's hard to get a good sample, and a good sample is everything. But hold on a second. Let me finish. Ahead. Since the rise of Trump, there has been, it seems as though, and this is where I think he would have much more knowledge than I do, there seems to be a rise in what I call garbage polls, which are just pollsters who take politicians' money to tell them what they want to hear. And, I would lump like Trafalgar Group in that. They were the ones who had Tudor Dixon pulling within a point, of Gretchen Whitmer, and had Dana Nessel, I think, losing. That race was going to be incredibly close. And I went into Tuesday. I was talking to a friend on Tuesday, and he said, my hot take prediction is Whitmer and Benson will win, but Dana Nessel will lose. And I even talked to another Democratic poll challenger when I was at Huntington Place, who is more plugged into the party, who said that, there was chatter in Lansing about what if DePerno wins, what can we do to kind of neuter him before he takes office? And, none of that even came close. I mean, these were landslide margins. And I just don't know how it happened. But
Allan.
I would agree in part with Nancy. I'll say, Ed Sarpolis in the primary was right on with
he was
with everything. And I don't think he really conducted polls on some of these key races. He did it on smaller races that people hired him to do it. But Epic, whatever it is that does the free
Epic
press
MRA,
one,
I think
they were pretty spot on with the Gretchen Whitmer poll. And really, when you look around they were bad in other polls. I mean, I thought Nessa was going to pull it out just because Matt DePerno was so toxic.
Right.
I mean, she could have been beat if Tom
I thought
Leonard,
it would be a squeaker, though. I really did. And
Yeah.
she beat him by 9 points. I mean,
but around the country where we had, the Pennsylvania race, we had the Herschel Walker race, those were the polls were kind of varying a little bit, but they were all basically saying these are going to be really, tight ones. And the Arizona race, the Kerry Lake race, we see Kerry Lake is still, I think, trailing by like 27,000 votes, but it's not over yet. So some of the polls have been good. I think they're improving from 2016 was horrible. It was disastrous. I mean, I think they've gotten better, but they're still a little inconsistent. And in Michigan, like I say, Epic was probably the best, and Ed was great on the primaries. I don't think he had any like Gretchen Whitmer polls and stuff like that. But
okay. I mean, the last time he was on, one sec, I thought he was kind of worried about Proposal 3, and Proposal 3 sailed by too. So anyway, sorry, Greg, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. I mean, back to the original question, I think one of the reasons why, or I think there were 3 reasons why the Republicans tanked so badly here in Michigan. And there was concern in the Democratic Party for the efforts that we have been making up until like 3 weeks. The last 2 weeks, things turned a corner for us, and I think started picking up confidence among the base. One is that there was too much focus on the abortion issue. For sure, the abortion issue was something that was, and the polls have shown it, and the voter exit polling has shown it, that it brought a lot of people to the table, a lot of independents, and it brought women who would traditionally necessarily vote Republican, who made this a single issue for them. And that was good. We were concerned whether or not the people that voted for Proposal 3 would then turn around and vote for Democrats, up and down the ballot, because one was not necessarily linked to the other. And the reason why was because the Proposal 3 group, there was this broad coalition of Republicans and Democrats and independents and lots of people who weren't necessarily in the Democratic base trying to pull this thing off. And so they were very shy about linking Democrats to Proposal 3. The governor wasn't, however, and I think that she carried the ball for the party in lots of ways leading up to the last 3 weeks when messaging started to change. And the messaging started to change and started to target Black and brown communities more. I heard ads on the radio in a Black barbershop trying to convince people to vote for Proposal 3, and here's why. And we all know, and I think the messaging also shift a little more to this, to really focus in on a woman should have the ability to decide what to do with her body. It kind of skirted the issue of abortion, but made that a top issue. And I think that really appealed to young people, and the Democrats grabbed hold of that. That was the first thing. The second thing I want to say is that made the difference here is that even the governor began to speak more towards issues, and the ad spending started to reflect this. They were bypassing Southern Oakland County and Western Detroit County in the fight for votes. And that was a huge mistake. You didn't see billboards or signs or lawn signs or anything. And they really ramped that up. The governor had at least 2 bus visits I can think of in several different areas. And they also had a hip hop concert. There was a comedy show. There were all kinds of things that were going on to reach Black and brown communities and young folks. And when the governor was at Clark Park, she spoke directly to the people there by saying, you know, look, I talk a lot about roads and we spend a lot of money on roads. And the reason why I do that is because I understand that if you have to replace a rim, that could come out of your rent money. That could come out of the grocery money. And so making that direct link to people was good. And they started to go where people were. And then the third and final thing I think that was really important that changed and did the Republicans in was counting out the youth vote. This
that very true.
Yeah, that was huge. I mean, my daughter, she's 24 now. And when the road decision came down on June 24th, she was out there organizing and her friends were out there organizing. And a lot of these people were the same people that organized around Black Lives Matter and organized around Stop the Asian Hate. And, you know, this was like a new spark that had kind of died down. But, you know, the commercials that were being run framing Tudor Dixon as anti-abortion got them ginnied up again. And they came out in big ways. Oh, I'm sorry. And the fourth thing was, you know, the lady running for Secretary of State. Man, when she filed that lawsuit saying, you know, we're going to discount the Black absentee votes in Detroit and no place else. And
that's a shanda, as we say in Israel.
The NAACP got organized. The Council of Baptist Pastors got organized. The Interfaith Community got organized because they gave them an issue. It's like, this is what racism looks like right here. See this? This is the deal. And so those things brought people out. But, you know, before we got to that, man, you couldn't use abortion as, you know, a single issue to replace the base. It just wouldn't happen. Too many people were saying that's a white woman's fight. And we're not, you know, they're not really talking to me.
I thought it was interesting.
I'm sorry. Do you think it made this year, not just locally, but even nationally, did abortion move from being seen as a strictly blue issue or even strictly a female issue to have a far broader reach?
I think so.
I mean, if you take a look at Kentucky, you take a look at Kansas, you take a look at Michigan, I mean, it seems as though this wasn't just about, number one, the Democratic Party. It wasn't seen as a progressive issue. It was seen more as a health issue than really promoting it as a fundamental right. Those probably went into the calculus. Allan.
I was going to say, I thought it was interesting that the shift in the anti-abortion movement, really, instead of running the very emotional things of showing fetuses being aborted and all that stuff and talking about the evils of abortion, they just tried to say, this ballot proposal is so confusing. We don't know. Who knows what's in here? Why would you vote for something you don't even know?
The Charlie LaDuff line.
They tried to confuse people and tried to scare people and like, oh my God. And that's normally a pretty effective way to get people to vote against a ballot proposal, because they're like, there's too many things here. They may be right. I don't know what I'm voting for. I'm not going to vote for it.
When I was in Macomb County 2 or 3 weeks ago, all the billboards on 94 north of 696 that were about Proposal 3 said, your child is going to be able to have a sex change operation without your knowledge, you know, or they're going to, you know, cut your 13-year-old girl's healthy breasts off, you know, without your knowledge. It's going to happen in their school, you know, this kind of thing. So it's just like,
and it's gonna alter 43 other laws that we don't know about.
Right.
I mean, it was confusing to the illiterate, and it was extreme if you consider that, you know, a fundamental right is not a fundamental right. So actually on election day, I was downtown and there was a guy with an airplane and a billboard behind it that was anti-abortion flying around Midtown. And I was like, wait a minute, the Tigers are done. What's this going on here? So, but the point that you made about the youth, I think some of you saw the footage that at both University of Michigan and at Michigan State, you had lines that were 2-3 hours long of people registering to vote. Even if they were in line at 8 o'clock when the polls closed, they were allowed to vote. The last votes were cast right around midnight. There was a huge turnout on these campuses. And so Gen Z, it seems, or as we would say, Nancy, Gen Z, certainly did bring it. And I guess the question, yeah, go ahead.
Well, that's probably proposal 3 too. I mean, if there's one thing that every college woman at a school like MSU or U of M knows, it's a friend who had an abortion, and these are, I mean, it's just, that's a period in your life when unplanned pregnancies happen.
Yeah.
And they don't want to be told they can't have it. And then you add the older women who have gone through difficult pregnancies or miscarriages that were, that took a while to happen. And they think, do I want to be laying in a hospital somewhere, bleeding, and have my doctor or have the hospital on the phone with some, as Dr. Oz said, local politician, seeing whether I can get actual health care that I need? I mean, you add those two groups together and that was it. But yeah,
I think one of my favorite memes I've seen so far this week is that it looks like Rand Paul is now the only quack doctor in the Senate. Dr. Oz didn't make it. I said, "Wow, that's really choice." So what about on the national level? I mean, we got Fetterman who beat Dr. Oz pretty decisively. Shapiro beat Mastriano, which for the governor's race. So that was a pickup of a Democratic seat there. It looks like astronaut Kelly is on his way to a victory. I mean, it's all but declared in Arizona. Kerry Lake is right now running a little bit behind with still about 500,000 votes in Maricopa County, which tend to go blue. Laxalt might lose his 9,000 vote lead in Nevada. And we're back to a runoff in Georgia. But if Cortez wins in Nevada, then it'll just simply be the status quo of 50-50 seat with a crazy Herschel in Senate. Or it could be outright if Warnock wins that. What is going on in the minds of the Republican National Committee today?
Go ahead, Nancy.
Trump.
I was just going to say, I don't know, but I have to think that they are thinking it's time for us to clean house. I mean, I was just laughing with a friend of mine in Lansing on the phone about Michon Maddock, who was the head motherfucker in charge, as they say, in the Michigan GOP, was reduced on Wednesday to crowing about some school board elections which are nonpartisan in Michigan for the most part, but they pushed obviously that was a big issue for them was dirty books in schools. And so I mean, I don't know how you come out of you have to say this lady's got she's got balls, because I don't know how you come out of a disaster that Tuesday was for the Michigan Democratic Party and say, yay, school boards. I mean, you're supposed to be cover yourself with sackcloth and ashes and apologizing. But I have a feeling that's happening all over the country. And I think the Mitt Romney types, the old line Republicans, the traditional Republicans, the moderate Republicans are thinking it's not going to get better from here.
I think with Trump,
Dixon threw Michon Maddock under the bus, and Michon Maddock threw Dixon and Trump under the bus.
Right.
She did, exactly. Right. And I saw that story in the news today about the chief of staff for the Michigan GOP blaming Tudor Dixon for all of this. It's like, okay, as the top of the ticket, I guess she had some responsibility to have some coattails, but at the same time, you cannot look at those. I mean, she was easily the most presentable and appealing of those three. I mean, it was like her, a crazy woman, and a criminal. And that was,
if it wasn't for her, Ryan Kelly would have been governor for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Well, for sure. But Tudor Dixon was right in her response today or yesterday or whatever it was, in that she really didn't have a lot of support from the party, the kind of support the kind of organizing support that you normally see from the Republicans that were all out when Trump was in office. Remember, the Republicans were registering white folks in the hills, same day registration, and getting them down to vote. And that didn't happen this time. And why didn't it happen? Well, because they were eating their young. The people that wanted to participate were always in a fight, and they couldn't organize, around the issues in the way that they could before. So that was, I was worried, because when I saw people, normally as a Democrat, when we see people show up at the polls and we're seeing better than expected numbers, we're like, hooray, the Democrats are showing up, But with Trump, when the poll numbers got really high, the Democrats had did absentee, and their folks were showing up. People more likely to vote Republican, and so you didn't see that. And so when I saw the kids at the young people at MSU and the young people at U of M standing in line to vote, and I was very encouraged in a way that I had not been in a long time. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Republicans come back and try and get rid of same-day voter registration in some kind of way now, because it didn't work for them this time.
It's in the Constitution. They can't do that anymore, or at least it's
Yeah.
going to be incredibly hard.
I think the message was clear, not only in Michigan but across the country, that first of all, the Trump magic is almost gone. I mean, look, here, I mean, he backed the nuttiest candidates. He gave the Democrats such a break. He backed, I mean, Attorney General, definitely, I think they could have taken that with a less nutty candidate. Secretary of State, probably Benson would have won anyways, but it was a cakewalk with that. And I think
14 points. I mean,
yeah.
When does that ever happen? That's just
Right.
amazing.
Right.
And I think
I don't know.
think
I
the
guess
message,
you can go ahead and ask George McGovern, but okay.
Yeah, right. I think the message is finally, look, the Republicans decided when they had Trump, we want to win at any cost, and this is the guy who can do it. Now they're saying he's not going to win us elections, and we need to get rid of him. And they're going to have, once he announces, if he does announce, he's in. He doesn't like to lose, and he will fight dirty, and he'll make that the muddiest field. I mean, Ron DeSantis is a stronger candidate. Ron DeSantis is a scarier guy because he is a true believer. He's an ideologue. He believes. Trump does not believe, and he's more disciplined in his messages. He's not a nutty guy like Trump.
Well, and if
he's scary, but
in my conversation with my friend in Lansing, he said, "What if they go head to head in 24 and DeSantis prevails? What do you think Trump is going to spend the rest of that cycle doing?"
Right. Loser, Ron DeSantis, Ron sanctimonious.
Right.
I know, Ron. That's really funny, actually.
I know.
They're afraid. They're afraid of him. I think the Republicans are trying to figure out, how do we push this guy aside without him damaging us? I mean, look, he could run as an independent against DeSantis and wipe out the Republican Party again.
Well, and
he's dangerous, and they know it.
The two things that you guys just brought up, I think, are important, and I think this is why I believe that Herschel Walker is going to ultimately lose in Georgia, because of the antics and the character be damned. We want our win. Given the loss that was suffered nationally, I think it's hard for people to go down that road and experience another loss. They're going to the wall saying, we don't care if this guy is he's abortions and he's a hypocrite and all this stuff. We want to win. They just played that out nationally and saw what happened. I think that's going to tamp down some of the enthusiasm in Georgia for their candidate. The other thing, though, is that when it comes to Ron DeSantis and Trump, I'm a little worried about that, because that is going to be entertaining. People are going to pay attention to that. That is going to be the only thing going on in the presidential race, and it's going to suck all the oxygen out of the room, and everybody's going to pay attention to Republicans again and their ideas or lack of ideas. But at the very least, it'll be entertaining. And remember, Trump joked and insulted and entertained his way to the presidency last time. nobody took him seriously. You know, what did they say? Don't take him literally.
Take him seriously, not literally.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah. That
But
kind
I
of
mean,
thing.
arguably the most the dullest guy in the Democratic field ended up getting not only the nomination but got the presidency. I mean, slow and steady wins the race. Alan.
Are you
I was
talking
gonna
about
say,
my man Joe?
all right.
Go Joe!
I think in the Georgia race, I mean, it'll be interesting without Kemp at the top of the ticket. I remember they interviewed a woman on TV, and she said, I enthusiastically voted for Kemp, and I unenthusiastically, reluctantly voted for Herschel Walker. And without Kemp being on the ticket, you wonder how that might impact Herschel Walker, where people realize he's an idiot. I mean, there's no question. Even the people are voting for him. They just want to, they want the majority in the Senate. That's their only reason. There's no redeeming value to him as a U.S. senator.
Well, I think that's why Lindsey Graham wants him to win so badly, because it'll make his speeches a little bit more animated than Lindsey Graham's on the Senate floor. But, 2%, remember, 2% of the vote in Georgia went to a libertarian candidate. And so it's going to be interesting to see, number one, if that group breaks for Walker. And number two, whether or not they just say, we don't like either one, and they just don't show up, which, of course, then would favor Warnock. So,
man, imagine, that this was such a hard fought race. I have friends in Atlanta, and, I know that they are just so thoroughly sick of political ads, and, now for it to start all over again and go for another, when's the runoff? Is it December
6th?
6th. Okay. So you got another, 3 weeks of this. It's like, oh my God.
I wouldn't be surprised if they chucked that system.
Well, runoffs are actually, one of the stories I did when I worked for Bridge was on political reform, and I interviewed Jocelyn Benson, who knows more about it than just about anybody. And runoffs are not a terrible thing. And ranked choice voting, which a lot of people struggle to understand, is also a pretty good idea. This is what saved us from the second coming of Sarah Palin in Alaska.
Right.
So it's, the idea is that the current system that we have rewards extremists on both sides. And if we had something where politicians had to appeal more to the middle, we might have something that gets done. Hey, Lengel, you seem to be following this fairly closely. We haven't talked about Bobo in Colorado yet. How's Lauren Boebert doing?
Yeah.
You know what? I saw she might have pulled ahead by, but it's just a skosh. But I don't know if they've.
She has pulled ahead by I think 1,000 or so votes, but there's still some outstanding in the two. One county that broke for Biden, one that broke for Trump. So that's going to come down to the wire. But I want to get to this point about DeSantis nationally. I mean, I know a lot of people think that he's not going to be able to really appeal. He tends to be kind of dull, especially related to Trump. But what about the idea of him peeling off more, shall we call them, middle of the road Democrats who don't like the progressive agenda? They hold their nose voting for the Democrats because they don't like Trump and some of his shenanigans. Do you think DeSantis is going to appeal to them, especially when he's talking quote unquote parental rights?
I think he might. I think he might peel off some. I don't think it's
Democrats.
Gonna be huge.
We're talking.
It's not going to be huge. But look, if it's Joe Biden again, I think people are a little worried about it. I mean, every time we look, Joe Biden has actually done pretty well. I mean, look, he held off. I mean, the Democrats.
He's the tortoise.
Yeah,
really
the
is.
Democrats should have gotten.
I thought that
killed.
was McConnell.
No, that's the Grim Reaper.
The turtle.
and I think people don't give Joe Biden enough credit, but at the same time, when we see him talk, we get a little nervous. Like, come on, Joe, keep going. You feel like the battery's going to stop right any moment, and he's just going to stop in mid sentence with his mouth like.
It's okay, Alan. There's no batteries needed. There's actually a crankshaft.
Oh my goodness.
That's a good question, but I have to think that if you are a Democrat, even a moderate Democrat, Look at me, I'm gesturing like Trump. If you're even a moderate Democrat, I don't see how you could vote for Ron DeSantis. I mean, you talk about they hold their nose at the progressive agenda. What is the progressive agenda anymore? I mean,
So
AOC.
let
Go
me
ahead.
fill that in for you. I mean,
Okay.
let's talk about what was going on in Dearborn in the lead up to the elections with
Oh,
the whole
yeah,
school
yeah, yeah.
district thing. DeSantis, Tudor Dixon, a bunch of these people swooped in and they tried to go ahead and exploit it, and all of a sudden they were actually giving a loving embrace to a group of Arab Muslims there, and it worked. They forgot that this was the party of the Muslim ban, and they forgot about how closely affiliated they are with Trump, and the idea then that because of their construction of social conservatism, it certainly is something that attracted them to DeSantis. So I'm wondering if that could have a multiplier effect.
I don't think so.
I don't
Because
think
it
so.
can't,
My
it
gut
can't
tells me
stick.
no, but
You know, the Republicans are going to republic. They're
Yeah.
going to do their thing,
That's
man.
I think that's
they're going to turn on the
Republic. I
Muslims.
think that's Republicate. It's
Right.
a verb.
Oh, I like
Yeah.
that. I like that. They're going to republicate. They're going to go back to their nature, and they're going to turn on the Muslims the first chance that they get, the first opportunity that they get.
But he's
And they're gonna-
asking if there's a multiplier effect, if they could,
Yeah,
because you're right.
We saw that happen with the Chaldeans and Trump in 2016, and he kind of screwed them over with the ban.
Right.
But here it is about selling the snake oil, it seems, and whether they'll go ahead and take that.
I worry about the Hispanics. The Latino
Yeah, that's
vote.
more of a worry
I mean,
to me.
it's really disturbing, the trend there, and it's
Yeah.
like, what do they offer? I mean, maybe some are more conservative about abortion and stuff like that, but it's the Democratic Party should be really working on bringing the Hispanics solidly into the party and not letting the Republicans pick them off like they're doing.
Educated voters, I think, see the social issues for what they are, which is just dust in the gears.
And Farnell chimed in and says that the party of the Muslim ban ran Mehmet Oz, who's a Muslim. You're absolutely right, Ann, but I can tell you that Muslims pretty much have disavowed him of being a Muslim, and part of that is because he actually didn't run as a Muslim, and nor did the Republicans go ahead and necessarily tout that.
I thought he was running as a Jewish person.
No, he was actually running as a transplanted New Jerseyite.
Oh well, yeah.
And didn't he also try?
Don't put it on the Jews, Greg.
Didn't he also try to? He was objecting to being identified by his first name. Like he wanted to be. I think one of the newspapers referred to him as Mehmet.
Yeah.
And he wanted to be known as just Dr. Oz, which is so ridiculous.
Well, I think
like the Wizard of Oz.
Well, I think his other choice was to be known as Mimi, but Mariah Carey is already known as that.
In the 60s,
is that a Muslim name?
Oh yeah, Mehmet is Turkish for Mohammed.
There you go.
I didn't know that. Okay.
In the 1960s, when Malcolm X appeared on Meet the Press, before the show started, he lectured some of the reporters and said, "Don't be calling me Malcolm. I ain't no bag boy." And so one of the reporters, who was a wise ass, said, "Okay, Mr. X, I've got a question for you."
Well, I did not know that. That's interesting, and it's interesting too. I had read that Tudor Dixon is actually Lebanese, or did you guys read that?
Tudor Dixon?
Her maiden name is Makari. I don't know if that doesn't sound Lebanese to me.
I think it is. I'll do a quick search for you.
And then of course she didn't run. I mean, but she went to Dearborn, but did not identify, with the majority population there as like, hey, I'm one of you. In disguise.
She didn't say like, don't tell it. Her speech was, don't tell anyone, but I'm one of you.
Right.
Keep this in the Dearborn camp here.
I can't say it out loud because my MAGA people might freak out. But
before we move on from Muslims and Dr. Oz, can we just at least give like a audience award to whoever ran the social media campaign for John Fetterman in Pennsylvania, and which was expert in its trolling of Dr. Oz, and did
Oh
it
my
in
God,
such a
it's
way that was
hilarious.
really funny. And my favorite was when they got Snooki from Jersey Shore. She's on Cameo, and if you don't know what Cameo is, it's a service where you can pay anywhere from like $50 to a few $100
$500. Yeah.
to get 500. Is that the upper limit? $500 to get a famous person to do a custom recorded video for you. And apparently they have found some of these. There's a lot of people on there who will pretty much say anything you tell them to say.
Right.
And so they hired Snooki on Cameo to say, "Hey, Mama, Snooki, I'm just really looking forward to you coming back home to New Jersey." It was hilarious.
Was it Smokey Robinson who was on there? Or was somebody Happy Chanukah?
Yeah,
Yes, it was.
Chanukah, right? Exactly.
It was not Smokey. It was Smoky.
Smoky.
Well, one thing is for sure, Dr. Oz won't be going to any grocery stores anytime soon.
Yeah, well, he's talking about crudité, and then they had Fetterman holding up the pre-cut veggie tray from the supermarket, pointing to where it said veggie tray.
Did you see the coda of all this? That someone was holding a ticket that said Dr. Oz, and it was a one-way Greyhound ticket back to New Jersey. Oh, it was choice. But I want to talk about this idea about party support. You can talk about how Tudor Dixon is crying in her soup about not having enough support from the Republican Party locally. What about the Democratic Party nationally? Carl Marlinga is outspent 6-1, and in a very tight race, but they pretty much gave up on that to allow John James to come in. Mandela Barnes running against Ron Johnson in the Senate in Wisconsin. That was also an easy pick-me-up, but he had no support there. And yet, putting in all of this money into California races, which really should have been slam dunks. Is this just really poor chess playing on the part of, in this case, the Democratic?
I think with John James, when it was 48.8 to 48.3, I don't recall seeing one Carl Marlinga ad. There must have been some, but I didn't see any. I saw constant John James ads. I mean, the guy is a weak candidate.
He's a two-time loser at Senate. They should have known that he was not going to, he wasn't going to do that well.
They were so intimidated, I think, by, oh my God, we can't win that. And I think because of Andy Levin, who should have run in that district in the first place.
Yeah.
And he somehow got in his head when his father, part of Macomb County, was part of his father's district. I don't get the whole thing. And when you see how close it was, I thought, like, okay, John James is going to win by 8-10 points, which were the polls were predicting. And here it was, talking about polls that were off. And here it was so close. For a couple of nickels and dimes, Carl Marlinga could have won that one.
Yeah, I agree.
And I don't recall a lot of even Republican full-throated endorsement of James. I mean, Candace Miller, who used to hold at least part of that district, I don't remember seeing her on the stump for John James. So it seemed as though there was quite a bit of vulnerability for it. Now,
the irony is now that for African Americans who are largely Democratic, the only African American in the congressional delegation in Michigan is John James. A Republican outside of Detroit. Now, whether or not, he comes from a strong Democratic family, but will he actually be the voice at the table? There are no Black Republicans in the Congressional Black Caucus. Will he change that dynamic and join the Congressional Black Caucus to advance issues? I don't know. On the one hand, he is now the lone Black voice out of 10 million people in the state of Michigan. So,
according to the vote, if the Republicans take back Congress, there is a possibility that he could be given some plum committee assignments to raise his profile. The other thing, apparently, from what the papers say, is that McCarthy doesn't have the votes right now to be speaker. So there might be a fight within the GOP regarding that. But when you're talking about the city of Detroit not having any African American representation in Congress, last Friday I was emceeing the American Arab Chamber of Commerce banquet in Dearborn, and Shri Tanadar was there. Shri was there. Debbie Davis was there. I mean, if there's any place that Shri seems like a fish out of water more than his district, it was at this banquet.
No kidding.
Yeah. I mean, people, I think they were coming up to him just more for the novelty and just to verify the authenticity of his hair. But by and large, it didn't seem as though he had the room. Debbie Dingle did, because I mean, she's sort of a stalwart. She and her husband, and I think that there was a lot of lament and sentimentality that she's not representing Dearborn anymore. Interestingly, Rashida Tlaib was not there. I don't know if that was a schedule conflict, but the keynote speakers were Garland Gilchrist, our lieutenant governor, and also Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg.
Really?
Yeah,
that's very interesting.
So they let the gay guy speak at the chamber thing when they were trying to kick him out of the libraries?
Well, to paraphrase another song, isn't it ironic? But he gave an amazing keynote. And part of it, as you might know, is Harvard, Rhodes Scholar, Oxford, in the military, speaks absolutely flawless Arabic. And he just dropped this Arabic proverb like it was nothing. The translation is, not every horse that rides in has a knight on top. And but it was, you could tell that there was like a collective gasp in the room. That how his delivery and how his cadence was flawless. Wow. But given the fact that we are now at the point where people are talking about 2024 and wondering if Biden's going to run again, it seems as though Whitmer is definitely being mentioned in the conversation. But what of people like Kamala Harris and Buttigieg and some of the ones that were there in 2020?
I think Kamala, and I was in D.C. Talking to somebody who is familiar with the situation. I think she hasn't risen to the occasion. I think the Biden administration hasn't really given her opportunities, but she's also, I don't think she's that good of a candidate. I think, and I saw the Washington Post had a front page story saying, Gretchen Whitmer won by, double digits. Now she's being mentioned as a presidential candidate. I'm not convinced that she's ready for that. I think she still needs some seasoning as a governor. I think she made some goofs along the way. I think she's done some good things. I think she's tried to stay on message, but I'm not convinced in 2024 I don't think she's ready she's ready as a VP candidate, but that's not really saying much. But I think Kamala, we're not going to see anything from her. I think she didn't fare well in the primaries. She dropped out before the primary here in Michigan. I think she's not a strong candidate, and I think she's kind of fallen short of what people's expectations were.
But if Biden runs again in 24, and I'm really crossing my fingers that he develops a health condition that makes him drop out, because I cringe to imagine him. I mean, he's, like you said, you're cranking. It's like somebody's got to crank him up sometimes. I don't think he's nearly as bad as Fox News wants you to believe, but I think he's definitely lost a step. And I just would really feel better if he was, it would step away. But that said, he's going to keep Kamala on the ticket. I mean,
Vice President.
She's a black woman, and it's not.
Yeah, he has no choice.
She's in a box. You can't be too white, too black for the white people, and too white for the black people.
She's half Indian, bro. I mean, come on.
And you can't be too white or black for the Indian folks.
You know what? It's interesting when I look around and I'm you try to think of who's a good Democratic candidate. I think of two people, and it's not because I'm Jewish that I think of these two people, but I think of
Bias.
Not that
there's anything wrong with that.
Right. Not that I'm in Israel right now. Speaking of the Jews,
you probably were you celebrating Netanyahu coming back?
Right.
We'll talk about that election.
That's a bad one. But Jamie Raskin, and Josh Shapiro. If you saw Josh Shapiro's speeches in Pennsylvania, they were Obama-like. They were pretty impressive, but they're Jewish, and that's a liability for them, I think.
You think
Yeah.
so?
I don't.
I don't
You
know.
know what? Have we ever
yeah.
had a Jewish president?
No.
No.
We had Joe Lieberman was the closest we had. He was running for
Oh, he was
VP.
terrible. He was
Oh,
awful.
He was
Yeah.
The worst.
That was bad.
I mean, even the British had a former Jewish prime minister, Benjamin Disraeli.
Speaking of that, just
That's
a
right.
little bit of a non segue, but I've been watching The Circus on Showtime, which is a great show on politics. And Steve Schmidt was talking about when they picked, and they didn't do very good vetting for Sarah Palin, that when they started coaching her for the debates, and she was like, "What's NATO?" And he was like, "Oh my God, we're fucked." My mother had a great line about Sarah Palin. She's during the election when she was running, she says, that Sarah Palin thinks she's such a big shot, but you know what? In Alaska, even I could be a big shot.
Brilliant line.
What was the show or the HBO dramatization of Schmidt's book? I forget what it was. It came out a few years ago.
Oh, the one with Julianne Moore.
Yeah, with Julianne Moore playing
Palin.
Sarah.
Oh my goodness,
Sarah Palin. I forget what it was.
that?
Anyway, my favorite Sarah Palin moment was when he's trying to brief her on world affairs and so forth, and he says, let's move to the United Kingdom. Who is the head of government in the United Kingdom? She goes, "Oh, that's easy, the Queen." Since she's head of state, he said head of government is the prime minister. But
and she lost the election.
It was called Game Change.
Yeah, Game Change. That was it. Yeah,
she lost the primary there, which was pretty
she did. Well, that's what we were talking about, ranked choice voting. That's what saved saved us from
pretty fascinating.
So what do you think? I mean, I'll frame the question this way. What was the biggest surprise for you for the election? I mean, I know, Nancy, you mentioned polls, but as far as an outcome,
that John Gibbs
let's
lost.
see.
I was really surprised that John Gibbs lost. Just kidding.
Do you think that that's going to vindicate the Democrats in saying, see, that kind of guerrilla tactics of supporting the crazy Republican in the primaries is something we're going to keep doing in 24 and more? Is it going to embolden them?
But for sure. I mean, that kind of stuff happens all the time. We just don't, people just don't really talk about it. They put other people in a race. They encourage them to run, knowing they can't win, but they'll suck votes from somebody else. Everybody does that kind of stuff. It was just like because of social media and the proliferation of media, generally, that this was out front. And it's like,
But boy, did it cause Kent County to go blue. It was shocking.
You know what? The Republican for governor, there were no good candidates, even when the five were still in it and running. I mean, Chief Craig was probably the best they had, and he was not very good.
He was the best. No, the Rinky guy, the car salesman, man. You gotta watch out for those guys.
That guy was a double clown.
That guy was dumb. That guy was double. I'm sorry. I'm really tired of second generation rich kids who were born into fortunes and then handed the keys to the fortune or to the bank and managed not to lose every dime they had, being touted as these business geniuses, and he's one of them. It's like maybe Mr. Rinky Sr. might have, but Kevin Rinky did not strike me as anything special, especially when he stood up at one of the first events that I ever saw him at and claimed that the Democrats wanted to legalize abortion 28 days after birth. I mean, that's just like,
I did a column with Kevin Rinky. When Kevin Rinky was saying stupid stuff, and the column was, Kevin Rinky wants to be your next governor. If only he had a clue.
There you go.
Ooh, that's cool.
Well, what about the fact that the Dems regained control over the state Senate and the state House?
I've been talking about this. That's
a headline that was buried too much.
This is literally a once in a lifetime opportunity.
Banner at the top of the Detroit News.
Generations.
Was it
Generation X? My generation, our generation. There, Saeed. We were in high school when this thing flipped. That was the last time, it went from Democrat to Republican, and we've been in the wilderness ever since. And so in the meantime, we had Generation Y, Generation Z, the millennials. It's taken all those people to be born for it to actually
40 years.
come
That's
back.
2
to
See, I
generations.
thought you were going to say that the children of Israel were wandering in the desert longer than we were. But I guess maybe it's not the case. We were actually wandering longer.
Yes,
So,
we are the real children of Israel.
okay, Kyrie, just keep that to yourself. That's a whole different.
I know.
ball of
Wait a
wax.
minute. Hold on. I tease Lingo all the time about the black Jews.
You're a kidder.
We finally got a place at the table in Israel.
Yeah,
But,
be careful, Greg. I mean, otherwise we're going to lose our sponsors.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? I'm all about the Black Jewish Alliance, brother. We are down.
Those sneakers that you and I were going to collaborate on. I mean, we're not going to have much of a market, man. So
Well, I did stop buying Adidas. That is true. I mean, Kanye was way over the top, and that guy, the basketball player dude, and then they referenced that sec, and I was like, oh, I think I heard of those guys. They're nuts.
Yeah. I will say that my biggest surprise was Pennsylvania. I really thought that Fetterman shot himself in the foot, even though I firmly believe he is perfectly fine in his head. He just has this aphasia problem because of his stroke that he's easily overcoming. I think I'm no longer surprised by the depths to which the Republican Party will sink in their abuse of anyone that they perceive as weak. Some of the commentary about Fetterman was truly disgusting. They were just talking about how he's this, mental, he's got butterscotch for brains. And, it's like, especially when they're all promoting Herschel Walker, who does seem to have butterscotch for brains.
Really.
Nancy, butterscotch is so 50 years ago. It's all dulce de leche now.
Dulce de leche. Yes, dulce de leche where his brain should be. Anyway, but I really thought that I didn't think he would win. And I think I was delighted by that.
I think with Fetterman, I think what we saw one is that after that debate, I think he looked wounded by that, but he came back and basically said, hey, I had a stroke. I did pretty well for somebody who's recovering from a stroke. And there was also the factor that we see down in Georgia is that people saw that as a potential pivotal vote for who was going to control the Senate. And I think the Democrats came through in that way.
Yeah.
The most powerful ad I saw regarding Fetterman was one that it had a picture of Stephen Hawking. And it said, hey, don't think that people who don't get all their speech right are limited. I was like, wow, that was really powerful. So I think, Allan, we are both here and in Israel at that time of the show.
All right, here we go.
Right, and because I'm dealing with schmucks all my life, I know who schmuck is. And I know the difference between a real schmuck, a plain schmuck, and just a plain regular schmuck.
Poor Ralph Felder. I mean, he's just sitting there looking lost. I think he must have just lost a divorce case. Okay, who wants to go with their schmuck? Greg, you look like you're.
I need to go because I have to go to a funeral.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah,
I thought you got dressed up for our show.
You didn't dress up for us?
It's not for the Republican Party. I mean,
Oh, wow.
So
go ahead.
Hopefully, my schmuck is John Gibbs, who lost. There in Western Michigan. Hooray! I'm happy about that. But my hope was that on some kind of way he would be able to redeem himself with a graceful concession speech, and he was completely unable to do that. And so it's embarrassing.
Has he conceded at all?
He has conceded.
But what was this? Did he give a shitty speech or what?
Yeah, he did. It was just sort of like, we lost through no fault of our own. And
he got killed. He got killed out there.
It wasn't me. It's
It was
just
because we
right.
let
It
all the
wasn't me, you
vote.
know,
Yeah.
and, you know, talked
if
about
it wasn't for that
some,
other meddling candidate,
you know, and God hasn't spoken yet or something weird like that. And it's like,
Wow.
yeah, I
Well.
think God spoke pretty loudly.
That's pretty bad.
Right. Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you want to do
God
that,
sent the message.
you want to blame it
Yeah.
on God. I mean, you know, all right, you know, that's God speaking, brother. Sit
Yeah.
down.
well, 50% of this panel can't blame it on God and his son.
Yeah.
So that's a whole different thing.
Hey, is Saeed, is Shri, is he Muslim or Hindu?
No, he's Hindu.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
How come that hasn't been celebrated as the first Hindu elected to Congress?
may
You
not
think
be
that's
the
coming?
first.
He's not. There's Ro Khanna. There's Prema Jayapal from Washington. There's Raja Krishnamurti from Illinois.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
yeah.
You are a walking encyclopedia, man. I would.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I
it's
turned
actually-
to him on my
actually,
South
these-
Asian,
these-
you know, expertise.
I prepared for today's show by tattooing them in henna on my arm.
I love all these firsts that they craft. It's like the first, non-left-handed, first left-handed black female born north of 9 Mile Road in Oak Park, it's survey. It's like
They let that
they always
happen?
find a way.
Oh,
Yeah.
man. Hey, guys, next time we're going to have to talk about East Point, but I do have to go. Thank you so much.
All right.
All right,
Okay.
man.
Greg.
Thanks,
See you later,
thanks,
Greg.
Greg.
All right.
Great
Have
having
a
you
good-
on.
have a good
Thanks for
weekend.
coming on.
Thanks,
Okay.
Greg. Appreciate it.
How do I click
Okay.
that? Oh, there it is.
Nancy
Just
Allen.
click.
Go.
I should name
Please
myself
continue.
Schmuck of the Week for making Ann Farrell so mad because I said Biden had lots of stuff. But anyway, that's our viewer. I'll go, and I'm going to give it to Paul Cordes, who I mentioned before, the chief of staff of the Michigan Republican Party, who dropped a memo yesterday blaming the party's historic midterm election. Thank you, Detroit News, on Tudor Dixon and an internal power struggle. It's like, you cannot lay this on Tudor Dixon, who was at least the most presentable of the top three.
Yeah,
I mean,
agree.
that has to
Agree.
absolutely be divided between the top three, but I'll certainly agree with him on the internal power struggle.
And she held her own during the debate, I thought.
She did. I thought
okay.
she did just
She did
fine
okay.
during the debate. I mean, she's clearly unqualified, but she's very
Right.
pretty. So I expect she'll do well on Fox News as some kind of talking head in the future. But that's mine. So
Okay. Allan.
I am going to go with the Democratic Party for failing to back Carl Marlinga to put any money into that
Good one.
campaign. Because I feel like I say, I thought maybe it'd be 8-10 point difference. And I say, all right, maybe it's just not, some people said, oh, Carl Marlinga, he's sort of a has-been or whatever. But look, the guy barely lost. And with just a skosh of little, money behind him, could have easily won, and that would have been a pickup, or at least retaining that Democratic seat. So I blame them. That was foolishness. It's like, how can we see something, and these guys are supposed to be the experts, and they're so far off? It's shameful.
And like I said, I mean, they could have picked up a Senate seat in Wisconsin. I mean,
Yeah.
could have gotten Russ Feingold's seat back, but there you go.
Ron Johnson is such a piece of crap.
Oh, he's horrible.
I know.
So
Anyway,
well, my schmuck of the week had pretty much been decided over the weekend. It was going to be Aaron Rodgers for being such a crybaby and so ungracious, saying, "How could we lose to that team?" Well, damn it, that's our team. Speaking of scions who inherit money and then don't really know how to do anything with it, the Fords. But anyway, but my schmuck of the week is actually none other than Madonna.
Wow.
In her quest to try to remain relevant at the age of 64, she has a new video out in Instagram with, other than the fact that she's writhing with several carnally oriented devices, she's licking water out of a dog bowl. And people,
she went straight from pop stardom to senility. That's...
well, I mean, and I used to really criticize Bobby Fleckman for banning the cover of Spinal Tap's Smell the Glove because it was seen as being too racy. But this is allowed? I mean, what kind of world do we live in? So, Madonna, you're my schmuck
She's
of the
really
week.
looking terrible these days too. I don't know,
Yeah.
her she's reached
there's-
a point where she's starting to look like a really bad after picture in awfulplasticsurgery.com. But she needs to like it's time. Give it up, you know? I mean, just it's time to start aging. It's fine. It's fine. I'm 65. I'm still totally hot. And you know,
and you know, you eat with a knife and fork above the table line.
Exactly.
Yes.
So.
All right. Well, listen, thank you for joining us for another show, another roundup of the week that was. Nancy Derringer, thank you. And Allan, enjoy yourself on your vacation.
Are you
with the
gonna be
last
back?
word?
Thank you. Drive home safely.
Thank you.